So in this video, we've got a bunch of cylinders leaking. The bucket cylinder's leaking, the boom cylinder's leaking, and one of the front loader cylinders leaking. So we're going to pull these off. We're going to show you how to do one. They're all the same. The tool we're going to use is an OTC 1266, and it's made for a 3/4 inch drive. It's got two different sizes of pins, and it's made for a case. A lot of other cylinders that have spanner head glands on them, the same thing, but really a handy tool, and it's tough. I've had it for years, but I'm going to show you a little trick on how I use it, and it's going to help you. So we'll get to it here. So we'll get started on this head gland here. First thing you want to do is you want to find, see this little screw sticking out right here? They do that a lot. They put that thing in there to keep it from trying to back off. So always make sure that you take that little screw out of there first. You can see where the oil's running. I wiped that head gland off already, but you can see where the oil's coming out of it. So get that little screw out of there before you do anything. No matter what, I always take and I loosen that head gland. And then I go around the outside of it. Gotta shake them threads loose. And once you get your tool in there and your pins drove in, I always take and I dry this cylinder off really good. Make sure there's no oil on it. And then what I do is I take a piece of cardboard and I bring that cardboard around here and I get it up tight against that tool, as tight as I can get it up against the edge of that tool, and I take a piece of Gorilla Tape and I tape that cardboard on there. Then I start wrapping that cardboard around it until I get it built all the way out to the point where it's actually holding this tool on, where it can't slip off. So to start with, you get your cardboard right up against that edge and tape it all the way across. And now you'll start winding this cardboard around until you get it built all the way out where it's going to hold it. So there's the first 3 wraps, and I'm clear up against the pins, and it's tight. You can see that tool doesn't even jiggle. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to start another one, and I'm going to go over the top of the pins and I'll wind it up again and get it all the way around it. Now there's my second wrap all the way around it. You can see that tool is not even moving. It does 2 things. Number 1, when you're doing it by yourself, you don't get aggravated with the tool coming off. Number 2, if the tool comes off, it doesn't scar your cylinder rod. So it's serving 2 purposes. We'll get this thing wound off of here now, hopefully. And I always take and leave the cylinder hooked up until I get that head gland broke loose, no matter what. This one here is going to be the next one. It's going to be the same exact way. You can see the locating screw right here. And we're going to leave it all hooked up until we get this head gland spun loose. And then we'll start disassembling. But always get your head gland broke loose before you try to take your cylinder off. So here you can see I've backed it off about 3 threads. And you can see where the tool is following the cardboard. So it's still tight. Works great. It keeps the tool from falling off. Works really great. I wanted to show you something here. Look at those hoses right there. Look what they look like. Aren't them pretty? Look at these hoses. I told the guy that owns this thing, I said, they're not going to last very long, and what's going to happen is they're going to start going one at a time until they drive you absolutely bonkers. When you get something like this, best thing to do is rip every one of them out of there and change them, because they're just going to start haunting you one at a time. One at a time. We'll have to take the two hoses loose so that the cylinder can get air when we pull the rod out and catch the oil. And then we'll pull the rod out and we'll get it in there on the workbench. We'll do the other one exactly the same way. So once we pulled the rod out of the barrel, we blocked the barrel up, we pulled the rod out of the barrel. We had to take our hoses loose to give it air so that when the rod comes out, you know, it can breathe. And then what I like to do is I always like to take, and whether you use a Ziploc bag or if you use shrink wrap or whatever you put around there, keep the dirt out of here. You don't want any dirt getting in there while and then set your fittings. Just set them back on there or wrap them up with a little tape too, just to make sure they don't get dirt in them. So we've got this one off. We'll get the other one out. So we've pulled this one out now. You can see a little scarring on the piston here. And on the back of it too, where something's been in there. I don't know what, but we're going to have to really pay close attention to the inside of this barrel and make sure the inside of this barrel is not all scarred up. But you can see where somebody's had a grinder and they've tried to clean it up before. So I'm real curious what the inside of that barrel looks like, but we'll get this one all covered up. So we take the 1.5-inch bolt out, and you can see the Loctite on it, or silicone. Somebody looks like they might have used silicone rubber on that one. Take the bolt out, slide the piston off. You can just really see the damage to it right there. Somebody's tried to clean that up, I'm sure. And then slide the head gland off. So the owner of this was telling me that I always tell people get a cylinder kit and bring me the cylinder kit and bring me the cylinders or whatever. But anyhow, the owner of this thing, he went to Case to get the 3 kits for the 3 cylinders, the bucket cylinder, the boom cylinder, and the 1 loader cylinder on the front. And he told me that they wanted $750 for 3 cylinder kits. I thought, oh my goodness. So this is the parts that he got. It says made in the USA. Bulldog, Tampa, Florida, USA. So this kit was 28, this one was 38, and that one was 92. And here's where he got it from. Broken Tractor, 800-909-7060. I've never used these parts before, but we're going to find out what they look like. Okay, so we've taken all the seals out of this head gland, and I wanted to show you, and I probably showed you before, but I'll show you again how I made this little tool. It's an old punch, and I ground it all on one side so that you can get started on that metal backed wiper, and once you get it started, then you can fold it over and it'll come out and it won't damage this head gland at all. There'll be no damage in that head gland if you take your time and you do it right. The other thing I like to do is I like to take every seal, U-cups and every seal, take your new ones and your old ones, lay them side by side. Make sure they're exactly the same, every one of them. Nothing worse than having, check the thickness, check the outer diameter, look at them and make sure they look exactly right. I wanted to show you this piston seal here. So you can see where there's a big chunk gone out of it right there. See where that big chunk's gone out of there? So there's no way that cylinder was working right. That oil was bypassing that piston. And there's no way that thing was working properly because the oil was going right on past it. But take a good look at it. The other thing too is, if you don't have a U-cup tool, this is a U-cup tool. If you don't have a U-cup tool and you try to put in a U-cup like this, you can see how stiff this U-cup is. You will never hardly get it in there without a U-cup tool. These things aren't that expensive. I bought a set of 3, I think for $60 or something like that online. I don't remember. It's been a long time ago. But they're worth their weight in gold when you start putting cylinders together. If you do one cylinder, it's going to pay for itself. So get you some U-cup tools and buy you a nice set of picks. This set of picks right here I've had forever, and it's a good set. I've never broke one yet, knock on wood. So anyhow, line up all your parts and make sure that everything that's in your new parts and your old parts are all identical. And the last thing I'm going to tell you is this buffer seal. You know, the hollow part goes down. Put it in first and then go back, and this goes on top and it pushes down in that little crevice. So just to save you a little time, the new piston, you put the expander underneath of it. This is your new piston, and you can see right here where it comes and it spreads itself apart right in that little groove right there. It'll spread itself apart enough that you can put it in there and then collapse it back on top of your piston. Just be careful and take your time, you'll be fine. So I always put I use Loctite. I put red Loctite on this wiper before I put the wiper in. There's nothing worse than seeing a wiper slide down the cylinder shaft. So I always put a little Loctite on there, and all the seals are in, the U-cup, buffer seals, bearing. I took a little flap wheel and I buffed on this piston and got the scars out of it. The inside of the barrel looks good, but I got all the scarring off of it. Makes me happy. I'll put the piston seals on there and we'll go assemble it. One thing I always do is I clean this bolt up real good and I put a little red Loctite on it. And then lube up all your seals and everything. I lubed up the head gland before I slid it on. Lube up all your seals before you stick it back in the cylinder. The other thing I wanted to show you real quick too is the U-cup tool. So the U-cup, open on the back side, that always goes down into the head gland. And you put that U-cup tool on there like that and you wind it up. And when you wind it up, you get her all wound up, that's what it's going to look like right there. You're going to set that down in a groove and then let it unwind real easy like. These U-cups are really stiff. You'd have a hard time doing it without that. I mean, you probably could, but one thing's for sure, that doesn't damage them. So on the end of my fork, on my forklift here, I got a hole that I put a trailer hitch ball in. I can move trailers around with it. Works real handy. But it also works handy if you put a bolt all the way down through your cylinder rod. It holds your cylinder rod, so when you go to take off your piston in that, it holds it for you without having a vise. It works pretty good like that. One other thing I wanted to show you too, you see how this has got a little bit of a taper on the edge, so when you put the head gland on here, it takes your seals and it lets them slide out and go over the top of that. I have seen some Caterpillars that do not have any taper on them whatsoever, and what they have is they have a stud sticking out of here. Well, then what you need to do is you need to either make your own or you go buy them from them, another piece that is exactly the same as this, and then you put a taper on the end of it, and once you get your head gland and that put on there, you go ahead and you take that off, you put your piston on it, and away you go. But I have seen some that do not have any taper right here, so be mindful when you lube this up and you go to put your head gland on that it does have a taper on it. Well, 2 down and 1 to go. I think that you get the gist of how they work and everything about it. So I hope someday this helps somebody along the way. Thanks for watching.